"She is unwell, Your Grace," the beautiful sister whispered, her fingers digging desperately into the Duke's velvet sleeve. "Please, for the sake of the guests, don't let her play. Her music is disturbing." Vianne Sterling, the Duke of Kellington, did not look at the woman clinging to his arm. His cold, slate-grey eyes were fixed across the ballroom, locked on the girl in the faded dress standing by the piano. The girl everyone ignored. He saw the tremble in her hands. He saw the fire in her eyes. "Disturbing?" Vianne asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Or revealing?" He pulled his arm free, walked to the center of the room, and closed his eyes. "Play," he commanded. What happened next didn't just ruin a party. It unearthed a 20-year-old scandal that would bring the aristocracy to its knees. This is the story of the sister who was silenced and the Duke who finally listened. The chandeliers of Halloway House had not gleamed this brightly in a decade. The wax was expensive, the crystals freshly polished by servants who hadn't been paid in 3 months, and the champagne was imported on credit. It was a stage set for a sale, and the merchandise was Lady Louisa Halloway. Lady Erica Halloway, the younger sister by 2 years, stood in the shadows of the gallery, watching the scene below with the detached curiosity of a ghost. At 21, Erica was already considered a spinster, a status cemented not by a lack of beauty, though she was often called plain in comparison to her sister, but by a deliberate erasure. While Louisa was draped in canary yellow silk that cost more than a tenant farmer's annual income, Erica wore a reworked grey muslin that blended perfectly with the drapes. "He is here." A hushed whisper rippled through the gallery. Erica leaned forward. The heavy oak doors swung open, and the footman announced, with a tremor in his voice, "His Grace, Vianne Sterling, the Duke of Kellington." The room seemed to tilt. The chatter ceased. Even the string quartet in the corner faltered for a beat. Vianne Sterling walked into the room like a storm cloud entering a garden party. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the seams of his black tailcoat. He was 32, possessing a fortune that could buy half of England and a reputation that terrified the other half. They called him the Iron Duke, not for his military service, but for the impenetrable wall he had built around his heart after the mysterious death of his fiancée 5 years ago. He did not smile. He did not bow. He simply scanned the room, his eyes dark and bored, assessing the guests as if they were cattle at an auction. "Look at him," Louisa hissed, appearing suddenly at Erica's side. She pinched Erica's arm, a habit she had developed in the nursery. "He looks like he wants to murder someone. Perfect." "He looks lonely," Erica observed quietly. Louisa scoffed, adjusting her diamond choker. "He is the richest man in the peerage, Erica. He isn't lonely. He's selective. And tonight, he selects me. Father says if I don't secure an engagement by the end of the season, we are selling the estate in Derbyshire. Do you understand? No more books for you. No more piano." Erica stiffened. "You promised you wouldn't take the piano." "I promised nothing." Louisa smiled, a sharp, brittle thing. "Father promised. And if I become the Duchess of Kellington, I might let you keep it. Now stay out of sight. You look like a governess who's lost her way." Louisa swanned away, the golden butterfly descending to claim her prize. Erica watched as her father, the Earl of Halloway, a man whose gambling debts were the stuff of legend at White's Club, bowed low to the Duke. The dance began. It was a waltz, shocking enough to be fashionable, safe enough to be respectable. Louisa maneuvered perfectly, falling into the Duke's path. As required by etiquette, he asked her to dance. They moved across the floor. Louisa was grace personified, her head thrown back, laughing at something he didn't say. But Erica, watching from the shadows, saw the Duke's hand. It held Louisa's waist not with passion, but with the loose grip of a man holding a newspaper he had already read. He was bored. He was seeing the artifice, the calculation, the desperation of the Halloway family. The music ended. The applause was polite. The Earl of Halloway, sweating despite the chill of the draughty hall, clapped his hands for silence. "My friends," the Earl boomed, his face flushed with wine, "my daughter Lady Louisa has prepared a special gift for our distinguished guest, a sonata." Erica felt a cold stone drop in her stomach. The sonata. Her sonata. Louisa sat at the grand pianoforte. She looked the picture of artistic perfection. She began to play. It was Mozart, technically proficient, the notes struck with the precision of a metronome. Her posture was perfect, her fingers curved just so. The guests nodded appreciatively. But it was empty. It was typing, not playing. There was no breath in the phrasing, no sorrow in the minor keys. Erica closed her eyes, her fingers twitching against the velvet railing of the balcony. She played the music in her mind, filling in the gaps Louisa left, injecting the soul that her sister lacked. When Louisa finished, the applause was raucous. The Duke, however, only clapped twice. "Charming," Vian said, his voice carrying across the silent room. It was a flat, deadly word. "You have excellent memorization skills, Lady Louisa." The compliment was a backhanded slap. Louisa faltered, her smile wavering. "Your Grace?" "You played the notes," Vian said, walking slowly toward the piano. "But you didn't play the music. It felt rehearsed. Transactional." The Earl sputtered. "Transactional? Your Grace, my daughter is a virtuoso." "Is she?" Vian turned, his eyes sweeping the room. He looked bored, agitated, like a tiger trapped in a cage of peacocks. "I was told the Halloway women were possessed of a unique artistic spirit. I see only instruction." He turned to leave. The humiliation was palpable. The Earl was turning purple. Louisa looked ready to faint. Then a sound cut through the tension. A heavy book, resting on the balcony railing where Erica stood, slipped from her trembling hand. It fell with a resounding thud onto the floor below, landing just feet from the Duke. Vian stopped. He looked down at the book, a worn collection of sheet music, and then looked up. His eyes locked onto the grey figure in the shadows of the gallery. "And who?" Vian asked, his voice dropping an octave. "Is that?" "No one," the Earl shouted quickly, signalling for a footman. "Just a poor relation. A cousin. Slightly simple in the head, Your Grace. Apologies." "Come down," the Duke commanded, ignoring the Earl entirely. He didn't shout, but the authority in his tone brooked no argument. Erica froze. She looked at her father, who was glaring at her with a look that promised retribution later. She looked at Louisa, whose eyes were narrowed into slits of venom. But the Duke was waiting. Erica gathered her grey skirts and walked toward the stairs. Her legs felt like lead. She descended slowly, entering the pool of light in the center of the ballroom. As she approached, the guests parted, whispering. The plain sister. The quiet one. The odd one. She stopped 3 paces from him. Up close, the Duke was terrifying. He smelled of sandalwood, starch, and cold winter air. He towered over her. "Pick it up," he said, nodding to the book on the floor. Erica knelt and retrieved her music. Her hands were shaking. "Your name?" he asked. "Erica," she whispered. "Erica Halloway. Your Grace." "Another daughter?" Vian turned his gaze to the Earl. "You failed to introduce her." "She is shy, Your Grace," Louisa interjected, stepping between them, her yellow silk rustling aggressively. "Erica doesn't enjoy society. She finds the noise difficult. She prefers her room." Vian looked at the book in Erica's hands. That is a heavily annotated score of Liszt, a difficult choice for someone simple in the head. He looked back at Erica. Do you play? Erica opened her mouth, but the words died in her throat. The rule in the house was absolute. Louisa is the star. Erica is the shadow. Never outshine the merchandise. She dabbles, the Earl said quickly. Nursery rhymes, hymns. I would like to hear a hymn, Vian said, his eyes never leaving Erica's face. He saw something there, a defiance she was trying to hide. He saw the calluses on her fingertips, the specific ones a pianist develops from hours of scales. Oh, Your Grace, you really mustn't, Louisa laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on the ears. She placed a hand on his arm again. Don't let her play. Her sister warned us all years ago. It's not proper music. It's chaotic. It disturbs the nerves. It makes people uncomfortable. Uncomfortable, Vian repeated. He looked at the polished, fake smiles of the crowd surrounding him. I am already uncomfortable, Lady Louisa. I am bored to tears by perfection. He stepped around Louisa and offered his hand to Erica. The room gasped. A duke offering his hand to the wallflower? Erica, Vian said, if you can play Liszt, you can play for me. I'm tired of lies. Tell me the truth, on the keys. Erica looked at his hand. It was a large hand, gloved in white kidskin. If she took it, she was defying her father. She was humiliating her sister. She would likely be beaten or exiled to the countryside tomorrow. But then she looked at the piano. The black and white keys were the only friends she had ever known. They were the only place she could scream without making a sound. She took his hand. The shock of his touch was electric. He led her to the bench. Louisa stood frozen, her face a mask of fury. The Earl looked like he was having an apoplexy. Erica sat. She adjusted the bench. She didn't put music on the stand. She didn't need it. What shall I play? She asked, her voice barely audible. Vian leaned against the curve of the piano, crossing his arms. He closed his eyes, shutting out the gold, the glitter, and the greed of the room. Play what you feel, he said. Play the thing you aren't allowed to say. Erica placed her hands on the keys. She took a breath. She didn't play a hymn. She didn't play a polite waltz. She struck a chord so low, so resonant, that it vibrated in the floorboards. It was a C minor, dark and tragic. Then her right hand began a melody that wasn't classical. It was raw. It was a piece she had written herself, in the dark, during the nights she was locked in the attic while Louisa had parties. She called it The Cage. The music started slow, like a heartbeat. Then it accelerated. Her fingers flew. The sound was stormy, violent, and incredibly beautiful. It was the sound of a bird throwing itself against iron bars. It was the sound of a woman screaming underwater. The guests stood paralyzed. This wasn't background music. This was an assault on the senses. It was improper. It was scandalous. It was the most magnificent thing anyone in Halloway House had ever heard. Louisa put her hands over her ears, her face twisting. "Stop her!" she hissed at her father. "Make her stop." But the Earl couldn't move. Erica forgot the room. She forgot the Duke. She poured 20 years of neglect, insults, and loneliness into the ivory. She played the silence of the dinner table. She played the coldness of her father's eyes, and then, abruptly, she shifted. The storm broke, and the melody turned into something fragile, weeping and soft. A single, lonely note repeated, high and clear, like a star in a black sky. She finished. She kept her hands on the keys, her chest heaving, sweat beading on her forehead. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with shock. Erica expected shouting. She expected the Earl to drag her off the stool. Instead, she heard a sound. Clap, clap, clap. Slow, deliberate applause. Vian Sterling opened his eyes. They were no longer cold. They were burning. He looked at her, not as a wallflower, but as if he had just discovered a diamond in a coal scuttle. "Again," he said hoarsely. "Your Grace?" the Earl squeaked. "I said—" Vian turned on the Earl, his voice thunderous. "Again. And if anyone interrupts her, I will buy the debt on this house and burn it to the ground." He turned back to Erica. "Who taught you that piece?" Erica swallowed hard. "I wrote it, Your Grace." Vian froze. He walked closer until he was looming over her at the bench. He looked at her face, really looked at her, and his expression shifted from admiration to something akin to recognition and horror. "You wrote it?" he whispered. "That is impossible." "Why?" Erica asked. "Because," Vian said, his voice trembling for the first time, "that is the melody my brother was humming the night he was murdered." The silence in the ballroom was no longer stunned. It was terrified. Vian's words, "murder," hung in the air like smoke. The Earl of Halloway stepped forward, his face a mask of panicked sweat. "Your Grace, surely you jest. A melody is just a melody. Coincidences happen." "I do not believe in coincidences," Vian replied, his gaze never leaving Erica's pale face. "And I certainly do not believe that a recluse in your attic accidentally composed the exact sequence of notes my brother, Lord Gabriel, whistled the night he was found with a dagger in his chest." Vian turned to the crowd, his voice projecting with military authority. "The party is over. Leave." It was a testament to his power that no one argued. Within 10 minutes, the cream of London society had fled into the night, leaving the Halloway ballroom echoing and empty. "Now," Vian said, turning back to the trembling family, "we will speak in private. The library." He offered his arm to Erica again. She hesitated, looking at her father. The Earl's eyes were bulging with a silent threat. "Keep your mouth shut." Erica took the Duke's arm. She had nothing left to lose. In the library, the air was thick with dust and tension. Vian sat Erica in a leather wingback chair and stood before her, blocking out her father and sister. "Tell me," he demanded softly, "where did you hear that tune? Did you know Gabriel?" Erica looked down at her hands. "I didn't know who he was. I only knew him as the boy in the ivy." "The ivy?" Vian's brow furrowed. 5 years ago, Erica began, her voice gaining strength. "I was 16. My father had forbidden me from entering the music room because Louisa needed to practice for her debut. I used to sneak out to the old stone wall at the edge of the estate where the acoustics were good, and I would hum to myself." She looked up at Vian. "One day, a young man jumped down from the wall. He had laughing eyes and messy hair. He told me I was humming in the wrong key." Vian closed his eyes, a look of profound pain crossing his face. "That sounds like Gabriel. We met there every afternoon for a week," Erica continued. "He never told me his name, and I didn't tell him mine. He said he was hiding from responsibility. He had a melody he was working on, but he couldn't find the ending. He played the beginning on a small wooden flute. It was sad, haunting. We worked on it together. I wrote the ending, the angry part, the storm. And then? And then he didn't come back," Erica whispered. "I waited by the wall for 3 weeks. I thought he had grown bored of me. I didn't know he was dead," Vian finished. "He was found in the woods bordering your land. The constabulary ruled it a robbery gone wrong, but nothing was stolen. His watch, his rings, they were all there." Vian paced the room, his mind racing. Gabriel kept a diary. The last entry, the day he died, just said, "I have found the ending to the song and the ending to the lie. I must tell the butterfly about the wolf." Vian stopped and looked at Erica. "The butterfly? He called you that?" Erica shook her head. "No, he called me Shadow." Vian's eyes snapped to Louisa, who was cowering by the fireplace. Louisa, who was currently wearing a dress embroidered with golden butterflies. Louisa, whose nickname in society papers was the Golden Butterfly. "You!" Vian growled, advancing on Louisa. "Did you know him?" Louisa shrieked. "No, I never spoke to him, I swear." "She's telling the truth," the Earl interjected quickly, stepping in front of Louisa. "Louisa was in Paris that summer. She wasn't even here." Vian looked at the Earl. He saw the twitch in the man's jaw, the bead of sweat on his upper lip. The Earl was lying. "Gabriel was coming to see someone on this estate," Vian said. "He found out something, and he was killed for it." He turned back to Erica. "The music. You said you wrote it down?" "Yes," Erica said. "In my notebook, the one I dropped." Vian picked up the worn book from the table where he had placed it. He opened it to the page Erica indicated. There, scrawled in pencil, were the notes. But Vian noticed something else. In the margins of the sheet music, in a handwriting that was not Erica's, were numbers. "Who wrote these?" Vian asked, pointing to the tiny digits. Erica squinted. I don't know. They weren't there when I wrote the music 5 years ago. I haven't looked at this specific page in years until tonight." Vian stared at the numbers. 10 to 4:20. 8 to 15:12. It's a cipher, Vian realized. Gabriel loved codes. He looked at the Earl of Halloway. The Earl's face had gone the color of old ash. He knew what was in the book. "I am taking this book," Vian declared, "and I am taking Lady Erica." "You cannot!" the Earl shouted. "She is my daughter. It is improper." "I don't give a damn about propriety," Vian snarled. "I care about justice. She is a material witness in a murder investigation. She comes with me to Kellington Hall tonight." "No," Erica said. Everyone turned to her. "I won't go," Erica said, standing up. She looked at her father, then at Vian. "If I leave now, with you, my reputation is destroyed forever. I will be a mistress, a scandal. I will not trade one cage for another." Vian looked at her with newfound respect. She had a spine of steel. "Very well," Vian said. "I will leave you here for tonight, but I will have guards posted at your gate. I will return tomorrow morning with a special license. I intend to marry you, Lady Erica." The room gasped. "Marry her?" Louisa screeched. "She's a mouse." "She is a symphony," Vian corrected, "and you are merely a ringtone." He bowed to Erica. "Lock your door, Erica. Trust no one, especially not your family." With a swirl of his black cape, the Duke left. As the front door slammed, the silence returned to the library. Erica looked at her father. The Earl was no longer sweating. He was smiling, and it was the most terrifying thing Erica had ever seen. "Marry the Duke," the Earl muttered. Imagine that. A Halloway in Kellington Hall. He walked over to the fireplace and picked up a heavy iron poker. "But he isn't marrying you, Erica," the Earl said softly, "because you are going to have a terrible accident tonight." Erica backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Father, do you think I will let you ruin us?" The Earl's voice was calm, detached. "Do you think I will let that Duke decipher those numbers? I know what Gabriel wrote in your book. I saw him do it." Erica's blood ran cold. You saw him?" "I found him in the woods," the Earl admitted, testing the weight of the poker. "He was meeting Louisa, or he thought he was. I had sent the note. The boy was clever." Too clever. He found out about the shipments. Shipments? Opium, Louisa said from the corner. She didn't look shocked. She looked bored. Oh, stop looking so pious, Erica. How do you think we paid for your piano lessons? Father has been moving opium through the coastal caves for years. Gabriel found the ledger. He copied the coordinates into your stupid music book while he waited for you, thinking he was being clever. He was going to turn us in, the Earl said. I had to stop him. You killed him, Erica whispered. You killed the man The man you what? Loved? Louisa laughed, cruel. He didn't love you. He was using you to get close to the house. Enough, the Earl snapped. Louisa, get the rope. We can't kill her. The Duke will ask questions if there is a body. But if she disappears? If she goes mad? St. Jude's, Louisa smiled. Exactly, the Earl said. We will say she had a hysterical episode after the party. The pressure of the Duke's attention broke her fragile mind. We had to send her away for her own safety. By the time the Duke finds her in that hellhole, she really will be mad. Erica turned to run, but the Earl was faster. He lunged, grabbing her by the hair. She screamed, but the house was empty of guests, and the servants were loyal to the paycheck the Earl promised them. They dragged her down the hall, not to her room, but to the cellar. Meanwhile, at Kellington Hall, Viano could not sleep. He sat by the fire, a glass of brandy untouched in his hand. He replayed the music in his mind. The cage. Why did he feel such a sense of dread? He had posted 2 guards at the Halloway gate, men he trusted from his regiment. She should be safe. But the look in the Earl's eyes, it wasn't fear of scandal. It was the fear of a man whose neck was already in the noose. "James!" Vian shouted. His valet appeared instantly. "Your Grace? Saddle the horses, and bring my pistols, both of them. It is 3 hours a.m., Your Grace. I don't care what time it is. We are going back." Erica lay on the cold stone floor of the cellar. It was pitch black. She could smell damp earth and rotting apples. They had taken her shoes. They had taken her shawl. "You'll stay here until the carriage arrives at dawn," her father had said, before locking the heavy iron door. Dr. Crane at St. Jude's owes me a favor. He knows how to keep patients quiet. Erica crawled to the corner, shivering. She closed her eyes and tried to summon the music, but her mind was silent. She was going to disappear. Just like Gabriel. Suddenly, she heard a noise. Not from the door, but from the coal chute high up on the wall. A scraping sound. "Erica?" It was a whisper, barely audible. She scrambled to her feet. "Who is there?" "It's Thomas," came the voice. It was the young stable boy, the only servant who had ever been kind to her, mostly because she taught him to read. "Thomas, you must help me." "I can't open the door, my lady. The Earl has the key. But—" A small bundle dropped through the chute. "I brought you this. And the Duke is coming. I heard the guards talking. He's coming back." Erica unwrapped the bundle in the dark. It was a heavy brass candlestick and a box of matches. "Thank you, Thomas," she wept. "Hide," Thomas whispered. "They are coming early." Footsteps thundered on the stairs above. The key turned in the lock. It wasn't the Earl. It was 2 large men Erica didn't recognize. Hired thugs. "Grab her," one grunted. Erica struck the match. The sudden flare of light blinded them for a second. She didn't try to fight them. She was too small. Instead, she threw the lit match into the corner, where the old, dry hay was stacked. "Fire!" she screamed. The dry straw caught instantly. The cellar filled with smoke. The men panicked. "Get her out, you idiot! We can't burn the merchandise!" They grabbed her, dragging her up the stairs into the kitchen. The smoke billowed out behind them, triggering the house alarms. Erica kicked and screamed. biting the hand of the man holding her. She broke free and ran into the main hallway. "Get her!" the Earl shouted from the top of the stairs. "Don't let her reach the door." Erica fumbled with the heavy latch of the front door. Her fingers were slippery with sweat. The thugs were closing in. Bam! The front door exploded inward. Splinters of wood flew through the air. Standing in the ruin of the doorframe, silhouetted by the moonlight and the pistol in his hand, was Vian. He didn't look like a duke. He looked like the angel of death. "Step away from her," Vian said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Or I will paint these walls with your brains." The thugs froze. The Earl halted on the stairs. Vian walked into the hall, holstered his pistol, and wrapped one arm around Erica, pulling her into his chest. He felt her shaking violently. "I have you," he whispered into her hair. "I have you." He looked up at the Earl. "Arson? Kidnapping? Attempted murder? You're a busy man, Lord Halloway." "She is my daughter," the Earl sputtered. "She is hysterical. She set the fire herself. And I suppose she tied her own hands." Vian pointed to the rope burns on Erica's wrists. Vian turned to his men waiting outside. "Arrest the Earl and Lady Louisa. Hold them for the magistrate." "On what grounds?" Louisa cried, running down the stairs. "On the grounds of treason against the crown," Vian said, "and the murder of Lord Gabriel Sterling." He looked at Erica. "We cracked the code on the ride over, Erica. The numbers in your book, they aren't just coordinates. They are dates and account numbers for the French bank where your father hides his opium money." The Earl slumped against the banister, defeated. Vian scooped Erica up into his arms, carrying her out of the smoke-filled house and into the cool night air. "Where are we going?" Erica asked, burying her face in his coat. "Home," Vian said. "We are going home." Kellington Hall was a fortress of stone and glass, vastly different from the crumbling decay of Halloway House. It was warm. It was safe. For 3 days, Erica did nothing but sleep and eat. Vian had given her the Queen's suite, rooms usually reserved for royalty. He did not press her. He did not visit her room late at night. He simply ensured that every time she woke, there was fresh food, a warm fire, and a vase of white lilies on the table. On the 4th day, Erica ventured downstairs. She followed the sound of a piano. She found Vian in the music room. He was sitting at a massive Steinway, picking out a melody with one finger. He looked frustrated. He looked up as she entered. He looked tired. He hadn't shaved in a day, and his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. "I can't play it," he admitted, not standing on ceremony. "I can't find the rhythm you used." Erica walked into the room. She wore a simple blue dress the housekeeper had found for her. It brought out the color of her eyes, eyes that were no longer frightened, but curious. "You are playing it too stiffly," she said. "It needs to breathe." She sat next to him on the bench. She didn't ask permission. "Show me," Vian said. Erica placed her hands on the keys. She played the passage that Gabriel had whistled. It was melancholic, sweet. "He loved you," Vian said quietly, watching her hands. Erica stopped playing. "He didn't know me." "I found the rest of his diary," Vian said. He pulled a small leather-bound book from his pocket. "He wrote about the shadow girl. He said you were the only real thing in a world of fake people. He said your silence was louder than their shouting. He planned to take you away the night he died. He wasn't just meeting Louisa to expose the Earl. He was coming to get you." Tears spilled down Erica's cheeks. "He never said." "He was afraid," Vian said. "He wanted to protect you from the danger he was in." Vian reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek. His thumb lingered on her skin. "I failed him," Vian whispered. "I was the older brother. I should have protected him. Instead, I was in London, drinking and playing cards. You couldn't have known, Erica said. I know now, Vian said intensely, and I will not fail you. I made a vow, Erica, the night I saw you play at that party. I vowed that I would never let anyone silence you again. He leaned in. The air between them crackled. It wasn't the polite, courtly tension of a ballroom. It was the magnetic pull of two broken people recognizing the missing piece in each other. Erica, he said, I don't want to marry you to save your reputation. I don't want to marry you because of the music. Why then? She breathed. Because, Vian said, when you play, I finally feel like I can breathe. You are the music I have been waiting for my entire life. He kissed her. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was possessive, desperate, and tender all at once. It tasted of brandy and hope. Erica didn't pull away. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the shadow. She was the light. When they broke apart, Vian rested his forehead against hers. The trial starts next week, he said. Your father and sister will face justice. It will be ugly. The papers will be cruel. I don't care, Erica said. They will call you the Duke's charity case, he warned. Let them, Erica smiled, and it was the first true smile he had seen on her face. As long as you let me play. Play, Vian commanded, leaning back and closing his eyes, a ghost of a smile on his own lips. Play forever. Erica turned back to the piano. She didn't play the tragic song of the cage. She played something new, something soaring, something that sounded like freedom. The trial of the Earl of Halloway was the spectacle of the century. The Old Bailey was packed so tightly that the air was thin and hot, smelling of damp wool and unwashed bodies. Outside, the London mob chanted for the Opium Earl's head. Inside, the atmosphere was far more venomous. Erica sat in the front row, dressed in severe black, her hand resting on the railing. She looked small against the vast machinery of the law, but she did not look down. Beside her, Vian sat like a statue carved from granite. He was there to support her, but today he was also a target. The Crown prosecutor had laid out the case methodically. The opium smuggling, the coordinates found in the sheet music, the testimony of the stable boy, Thomas. It seemed open and shut, but the Earl of Halloway had hired Sir Arthur Vane, a defence barrister known as the Viper. Vane didn't care about truth, he cared about doubt, and he knew exactly where to plant it. My lords, Vane purred, pacing before the jury. We have heard fantastical tales of codes and smugglers, but consider the source. We are asked to destroy a peer of the realm based on the scribblings of a young woman who, let us be frank, has spent her life locked in an attic. Vane spun around, pointing a long, bony finger at Erica. The prosecution claims she was abused. The defense asserts she was protected. Lady Erica has a history of delusions, hysteria, fits of fancy. Objection, the prosecutor shouted. Sustained, the judge grumbled. Stick to the facts, Sir Arthur. The fact is, Vane smiled thinly, that the only witness to the alleged confession of murder is the Duke of Kellington, a man with a complicated history regarding death. Vian stiffened. Erica felt the muscles in his arm turn to stone. Let us speak of Lady Margaret, Vane said softly. The courtroom went deathly silent. Lady Margaret was the fiancée Vian had lost 5 years ago. The official story was a riding accident. Lady Margaret died on Kellington land, Vane continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. She fell from a horse, or so we were told. But rumours persisted, didn't they, Your Grace? Rumours that you were a controlling man, a jealous man, a man whose temper could be fatal. You are out of order, Vian roared, standing up. His face was pale, his eyes wild. My fiancé's death has nothing to do with this. Doesn't it? Vane countered smoothly. You claim the Earl killed your brother, but perhaps you are simply a man obsessed with death, projecting your own guilt onto a grieving father. Perhaps you manipulated the fragile Lady Erica into fabricating this story to satisfy your own vendetta. The crowd murmured. The seed of doubt was planted. Was the Duke the hero or a madman seeking revenge? I call the Earl of Halloway to the stand, Vane announced. Erica's father walked to the witness box. He looked frail, broken, a masterclass in acting. He wept as he spoke. I loved Gabriel, the Earl lied, wiping his eyes. He was like a son to me. And Erica, my poor, sweet Erica. She has always lived in a fantasy world. She imagines music where there is silence. She imagines monsters where there are fathers. I locked her in the cellar that night because she was threatening to burn the house down. I was trying to save her. He looked at the jury, his eyes pleading. The Duke has seduced her. He has turned her against her own blood. Please, save my daughter from him. It was a devastating performance. The jury looked at Vian with suspicion. They looked at Erica with pity. The narrative was shifting. The Iron Duke was being painted as the villain. Vian sank back into his seat, his head in his hands. They are going to win, he whispered to Erica. He is twisting everything. If they believe him, you go back to the asylum, and I go to prison for slander. Erica looked at her father. She saw the tiny, triumphant smirk at the corner of his mouth. She looked at Vian, the man who had given her a voice when no one else would. The fear that had ruled her life for 20 years evaporated. In its place burned a cold, white-hot fury. Erica stood up. Sit down, Lady Erica, the judge warned. No, my lord, Erica's voice rang out. It wasn't a whisper. It was a command. I wish to testify. You have already given your statement, Vane sneered. I wish to prove my sanity, Erica said, walking toward the witness box. She turned to the judge. If I am mad, as my father claims, then I am incapable of what I am about to do. But if I am sane, then every word in that notebook is the truth. The judge looked at her, intrigued. Proceed. Erica turned to the jury. My father claims I cannot distinguish fantasy from reality. He claims I am simple, but a simple mind could not hold the accounts of the Halloway estate for the last 10 years. She closed her eyes. October 4th, 1815, she began. Deposit from Le Havre, £4,000, account number 8894. November 12th, 1815. Withdrawal to the Viper, £500. Sir Arthur Vane froze. January 3rd, 1816, Erica continued, her voice gaining rhythm like a metronome. Payment for silencing the shepherd, £200. The courtroom was stunned. She was reciting the ledger numbers from memory. Numbers she had seen only briefly in her father's study while cleaning, numbers she had turned into music to remember them. She is making it up, the Earl shouted, standing up. She is babbling. Check the ledger, Vian shouted, pointing to the evidence table. The clerk opened the seized bank books. He ran his finger down the page. His face went white. My lord, the clerk stammered. It is exact. To the penny. Erica opened her eyes. She looked directly at her father. I remember everything, father. I remember the numbers. I remember the neglect. And I remember what you said to Gabriel before you stabbed him. The Earl was shaking now. I said nothing. You did, Erica said softly. I was in the ivy, father. I heard you. You said, play this in hell, boy. The Earl's face crumpled. The veneer of the grieving father cracked, revealing the monster beneath. He was going to ruin us, the Earl screamed, losing control. He was a self-righteous little prick who didn't understand how the world works. The silence that followed was absolute. The Earl clamped his hand over his mouth, realizing what he had done. But it was too late. He had confessed. Vian stood slowly. He didn't yell. He didn't rage. He simply looked at the Earl with profound pity. "The music, my lord," Vian said. "It always reveals the truth." The gavel had fallen, but the echoes of the trial rang through London for months. The execution of the Earl of Halloway was carried out within the stone walls of Newgate Prison, a quiet end for a man whose life had been a loud, garish lie. There were no mourners. For Erica, the justice was not in the hangman's noose, but in the silence that followed. The constant, crushing pressure to be invisible was gone. The Halloway estate was dissolved. The Crown seized the assets to pay the staggering debts, and the house itself, that draughty monument to misery, was sold to a wool merchant who planned to tear it down and build a factory. When Erica signed the final papers authorizing the sale, her hand did not shake. She felt only a lightness, as if she were shedding a heavy winter coat in the first heat of summer. As for Louisa, the golden butterfly did not fare well in the cage of obscurity. Stripped of her titles and denied access to the remnants of the family fortune, she was dispatched to a convent in Brittany, a place of silent contemplation and hard labor. A letter arrived at Kellington Hall 3 weeks later, addressed to Erica. It contained no apology, only a bitter demand for silk ribbons. Erica read it once, standing by the fireplace in the Duke's library, and then dropped it into the flames. "She will never understand," Erica whispered, watching the paper curl and blacken. "No," Vian said, stepping out from the shadows of the bookshelves. He looked different now. The hard lines of the Iron Duke had softened. "She played the game, Erica. You played the music. The game always ends, but the music remains." Their wedding took place on the cusp of winter, on a day when the sky was a piercing, cloudless blue. It was not the grand society circus the Tun had expected. There were no hundreds of guests, no reporters from the gazettes, no desperate displays of wealth. It was held in the private chapel on the Kellington estate. The stone walls were decorated not with hothouse flowers, but with ivy and holly gathered from the woods, the same woods where Gabriel had once laughed, and where Erica had found her voice. When Erica walked down the aisle, she did not wear the grey muslin of a ghost. She wore velvet the colour of midnight, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like stars. She walked alone, refusing the offer of a distant cousin to give her away. She belonged to no one but herself, and she was giving herself freely. As they exchanged vows, Vian's voice cracked. The man who had commanded regiments and stared down mobs struggled to speak the words that bound him to the woman who had saved his soul. When he slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple band of gold, free of heavy gems, he leaned in and whispered, "My partner, my equal, my song." The months that followed were a period of restoration. Kellington Hall, once a fortress of solitude where the Duke drank to forget, transformed. The heavy drapes were pulled back to let in the sun. The dust covers were removed from the furniture. And for the first time in 5 years, the piano in the great hall was tuned. It culminated in the winter ball. It was intended to be a small affair, a celebration of the season. But the guest list had grown to include the true friends Vian had kept at arm's length during his years of grief. On the night of the ball, Vian found Erica on the balcony, overlooking the snow-covered gardens. The air was crisp and cold, biting at their cheeks. "You look terrified," Vian noted, handing her a glass of champagne. "I am not terrified of the guests," Erica smiled, though her grip on the stem of the glass was tight. I am terrified of the peace. I keep waiting for the door to be locked, for the music to be forbidden. Look at me, Vian commanded gently. He turned her to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. The locks are broken, Erica. The keys are in the river. You are the Duchess of Kellington, and this is your home. You can scream, you can cry, you can play until your fingers bleed. No one will ever silence you again. He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of winter air and promised lifetimes of warmth. Come, they are waiting for you, not for the spectacle but for the woman. They descended the grand staircase together. The chatter in the great hall ceased as they entered, but the silence was not oppressive. It was reverent. At the center of the room sat the Steinway, its black lacquer gleaming under the chandeliers. Erica approached the instrument. She sat on the bench and arranged her midnight skirts. She looked at the keys, the black and white terrain that had been her only country for 20 years. She didn't play a waltz. She didn't play a hymn. She began to play the cage, the piece she had played that first night at Halloway House. The opening was the same, dark, claustrophobic, the sound of a heart beating against ribs. The guests held their breath, remembering the scandal, the murder, the pain. But as the melody reached the point where the storm usually broke, Erica shifted. She found the notes she and Gabriel had toyed with in the woods, the fragments of joy he had tried to teach her. She wove them into something new. The music swelled. The minor key dissolved into a radiant major. The frantic pacing slowed, widening into a melody that soared like a bird catching a thermal. It was complex, weaving the sorrow of the past with the triumph of the present. It acknowledged the pain without being defined by it. Vian stood by the piano, his eyes closed, letting the sound wash over him. In the music, he heard his brother's laughter. He heard the wind in the ivy, and he heard Erica's heart, beating strong and free. She struck the final chord. It was a resonant, shimmering sound that hung in the vast hall, refusing to fade. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, the applause began. It wasn't polite applause. It was thunderous. It was a roar of approval that shook the crystals in the chandelier. Erica stood, her chest heaving, her eyes shining with tears. She looked at her husband. Vian stepped forward and took her hand, raising it to his lips. "What do you call that ending?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion, barely audible over the cheering crowd. Erica squeezed his hand, looking out at the room, then back at the man who had given her the world. "It is called the answer," she said softly. Vian smiled, the last shadow leaving his eyes. "And what is the question?" Erica pulled him close, her voice steady and sure. The question was, can a broken thing be mended? Vian kissed her forehead as the music of their future began to play in the silence between them. "Yes," he whispered. "It can, and it will be magnificent." And that is the story of Erica and Vian, a reminder that sometimes the quietest voices have the most powerful things to say. Erica spent 20 years in the shadows, but she never let the music die. It took a duke with a broken heart to finally listen, but in the end, her truth brought down an empire of lies. I hope this story moved you as much as it moved me. If you enjoyed this journey of mystery, romance, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I have a new historical drama coming next week involving a stolen letter and a runaway princess that you won't want to miss. What did you think of the Duke's decision? Would you have forgiven the sister? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and keep listening.